This is the Hard Thing Podcast. Today, we are overcoming average. Welcome back to the Hard Thing Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lewis, and this is the podcast that helps you win the war on average in your daily life. We're here to help you overcome average, step up above mediocrity, all by doing hard things. And to do that, we're going to give you the tips, tricks, tools, tactics, whatever you need in order so you can accomplish your goals and overcome your obstacles. On Mondays, you're going to hear from me and a high-performing individual who has done hard things and lived to tell the tale. And from their stories, we're going to extract lessons that we can learn and action items that we can implement in our daily lives. Now, on Thursdays, we have a different show. It's called The Forge, where myself and my co-host, Ty Crockett, actually do the action items that today's guest will give, and then we give each other different challenges. But that's on Thursday. So let me tell you about today's guest, or rather guests. I have the wonderful opportunity to interview have a conversation with Justin and Alexis Black, who are authors, they are business owners, and they are previous foster care children. So their book is called Redefining Normal, and it's a story about two foster care kids who were able to defy the odds and really just make a tremendous life for themselves. And it's a very insightful book, as you'll see from the conversation we have today. So let me just introduce you to Justin and Alexis Black. All right. Well, thank you guys for being on my show, Justin and Alexis. I'm super excited to have this conversation with y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, of course. It's an honor for us to be able to speak to you today.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy that there are two of you. This is my first time having two guests on one podcast. So I'd like to ask both of you the question that I give to all my guests. Justin, Alexis, what's the hardest thing you've ever done?
You can take that one first.
You want me to take that first?
Yeah.
I would say I have two things that come to mind. Let's do the light and fluffy one first. So the first one I would say is writing this book, just because we published a book, for those that don't know. It's called Redefining Normal, and I got a copy of it right here. So that I would say is my first thing, just because we had to be so vulnerable, and it really felt like publishing our diary, which was not an easy thing to do, and know that, part of the world is going to read it. So I would say is definitely one thing. And then the second thing, as the not so fluffy part, was testifying against my biological father as a freshman in high school.
Wow. Let's get Justin an answer, and then I'm just gonna dig into that like a fat person on Thanksgiving. So
there you go. We'll get to it.
Yeah. So she gave me time, but I still don't know. But man, the hardest thing I've ever done. Oh man, I would probably have to say, I guess graduating college is. I think that was a pretty hard task, being my first generation college student. Man, it's so many things that has been difficult. It's really hard to say the
most difficult.
The most difficult. And I guess that's just the only thing that comes to mind right now, is just trying to graduate college. And the hardest thing, really, I would say, outside of that, is probably just, this is like a long-term thing, but like just staying happy. It sounds weird, but staying happy is probably like the hardest thing anybody can try to do, especially with trials and tribulations in life going on. So
yeah, I agree completely. And one thing that I've noticed with asking a lot of guests that is, they always give like answers you don't expect, and the hard thing can always be kind of changed based on the frame of time. So I like how you said staying happy, especially right now with everything going on politically and socioeconomically, especially in the US. It's pretty easy to get jaded, but then, you talk to someone who just had a baby and they're like, yeah, the hardest thing is, getting up last night to deal with my baby and whatever. And so I really like how you kind of gave those two answers. So Alexis, first of all, let's talk about the book.
All right.
Because I think that'll be a really great segue into kind of opening up your story a little bit more. Mm-hmm. You have this story. You have to be vulnerable. It's your diary you're putting out to the world. At what point did you realize, maybe this is something that we got to get out from inside us and put it on paper and give to the world?
I really noticed that this was something far bigger than us that is really out of our control at some point. Was once we like got through the first draft and we read it out loud to each other. I read his part out loud and he read my part out loud, which there was a lot of ugly tears in that. There was not it was not an easy part because even though we were, writing this book together, we didn't fully check in with each other about, what are we going to write about in each section. We knew like the topics, but we didn't go over what we were going to cover. And I knew for a fact that like this was put on both of our hearts. And we're both Christians. So, we felt like this was really being downloaded into us when we wrote this book and wrote the first draft. And as we were reading it, I noticed that as I was reading his parts and reading my parts, I could see how he was filling in pieces that I didn't, and I was filling in pieces that he didn't. And the transition between our chapters were so seamless and like almost like they were planned out, but I promise they weren't. Like, that's when I knew I was like, this is so much bigger than us because we didn't even plan that. Yeah. And how much overlap is in our story and how our story just really folded into each other. And, going through our journey in the foster care system, going through, the traumas and other things that we had to go through, then that turning point of how did we get to where we are now? But it was an entire process and how we had to do it individually before we could come together. And that's why we wrote it in separate narratives so that readers could really understand we had to do this separately. Too many people get into a relationship knowing or trying to have that person heal them and fix them. Whereas this story hopefully really showed us and other people that nobody can heal you. Nobody can, fix you. You have to do that for yourself. And that was definitely one of the biggest things that I got from this journey of writing it.
Wow. I actually find that a very nice allegory for relationships in general. I think, if you're doing your relationship right, you're kind of working on yourself, building yourself rather than trying to change the other person's rough draft, if you could say it that way. Yep. And then when you finally read the rough draft of the other person, you find that, wow, so many things are just blending together versus, you go in and you try and write the other person's part and you find out your part's completely empty and theirs doesn't sound as good as if they'd said it, so I find that a very nice.
I love that. And that's exactly how it is in real life.
Yeah. So peeling back a little bit more, this book details how you both kind of came up through the foster care system, defied the odds. Bring us back to the beginning before you made it through. At what point were you both at?
You can take that
one. So, yeah, I entered the foster care system at 9 years old, and bringing it even further back from that, originally from Detroit, and I always say that, just the barriers of being, I think Detroit is almost one of the blackest cities in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, a lot of people know of Detroit as, for a while, like I think over a decade ago, it was like the murder capital. It's one of the cities filled with the most crime in the U.S. And unfortunately, there's a lot of what I've dealt with and seen growing up. And we talk about the title and the idea of redefining normal, but that was my normal growing up, just seeing poverty, seeing crime, and a lot of just oppression, I would say, that a lot of underprivileged, marginalized Black communities deal with in the U.S. And I think the example of that is in Detroit. And a lot of my family, my dad I've seen domestic violence from my dad to my mom and just a lot of violence, and it became normal in my lifetime and in my childhood, and poverty and drug abuse just became normal, and being sexualized at such a young age, watching porn for the first time at 5 years old. So many things became normal, and I'm fast forwarding a lot, but being out of that situation, I see how the youth in my family and in other Black communities are growing up, and that situation and these things that I've seen growing up becoming normal to them. And now that I'm looking in from the outside, I just see how traumatizing, how crazy it is. And it's kind of the environment and the setting that I grew up in, just what some people think is normal, completely opposite of what they would have believed and what they would have thought. And there's a whole culture of people a lot of times who are dealing with that normal of seeing violence on a daily basis, of being sexualized in multiple different ways on a daily basis. And they accept that and they internalize that. And the world kind of judge them and attack them for it. And I think that's the situation that I was in as a child. And that's the environment that I was in my teenage years, internalizing those things, but being judged and attacked for, even though I was just internalized on the culture and identity that I grew up in.
Wow. So let's pretend that maybe someone who's listening to this finds themselves in a very similar situation, or maybe not as drastic, but definitely in that kind of level, I'd say. What advice would you give to the person who's in the thick of it?
Yeah. So for someone who is in the thick of it, we always do our presentations. And a lot of times when we do our presentations for other foster youth, other students or youth who have experienced trauma, I always try to get to the core and the root of who they are, because a lot of times we're just a reflection of our mother, our father, or those around us who've hurt us, trying to redirect that pain and trauma onto someone else. So during our presentations, a lot of times we try to dig deep into the core of who people are and have them understand what are the characteristics and the foundational pieces that make you who you are. And is that conducive for your future and those around you? We ask those tough questions, and not that people need to get personal when we interact and talk to people, but those are questions that they need to ask for themselves. You know, are you eternalizing your trauma and expressing it in a negative way? Or are you trying to do better on a daily basis? The message I would say, and something that would help me while I was in the thick of it, is take things day by day and try to get better, try to learn, and try to be a better person that you were the day before.
Wow. Have you guys, and this is kind of like a weird question, but it totally applies, I promise. Have you guys ever seen Stranger Things?
Not,
Nah.
I think maybe once.
It's a popular show, but I never seen it.
Yeah.
So basically, in the third season, there's this part where, and I'll try not to spoil too much, but there's a young girl who has psychic powers, right? And there's a boy who is basically, she kind of goes into his mind, right? And she's looking for something specific, and she's kind of going through his history, and she sees him as a little boy. And this boy, he's troubled, right? He's kind of a jerk. He's mean to everyone. He's like, classic bad A, smokes, all that stuff, like macho man or whatever. And she sees him as this boy, and she sees these various experiences where he goes from this bright and happy little boy to this bully, same age, but she sees these experiences. And I feel like that's kind of what you're describing when, you peel back the layers that we build up on ourselves to face the world, these bits of armor, and we get down to the nut of ourselves, and we figure out, okay, like, is this right here, is that working for you? You know what I mean? And I feel like that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much.
I love that. That is exactly what it comes down to.
Yeah.
It's what is the world shaped you to be, and is that something you should continue being, or is there a way that you could peel back those layers and figure out who are you at your root to move forward? And that's something I had to do. I was in an abusive relationship for 8 years, and my entire identity was wrapped around this individual. And I went through, depression, suicide attempts, all these things. And once I finally left that person, I had to see, like, who am I? What do I stand for? What is my identity? Because I had none of that. I felt like everything was stripped away when I left that person. I had to really dig deep and peel that back and, and just kind of recreate myself of what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm. At what point for you, Justin, did you kind of have that realization for yourself? Because I know you said you're first generation college graduate, and obviously that's not easy. That's not easy for anyone, but that especially not easy coming from a background where you're doing it kind of, I'm guessing, all on your own, very, very little support. But when did you have this realization that, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to do it, and you know what, I'll get there?
Yeah, I mean, I can never say I had little support. I mean, I've had so much. I mean, don't get me wrong, like early on in life, I didn't have much support with my family and in my community, my immediate community. But as I grew older, as I sought out amazing mentors, well, I didn't seek them out. They found me. Amazing people found me, luckily, by the grace of God. And when they found me, they believed in me, and they seen something in me. I don't know what it was, but they made me believe in myself. And they believed in me more than I believed in myself. And their belief in me made me work hard for them. When I tried to get good grades in high school, and first freshman and sophomore year, I didn't believe I can go to college. I don't even know if I believe I can go to college junior year, but I worked hard, and I worked hard for the people who believed in me, not even for myself. And it got to a point where, I was able to do those things, and they believed in me and supported me to get to college. And it really took a community. It wasn't, a different race of people or a different, it wasn't just completely different, but it was just people giving me words of affirmation. I was able to see amazing examples of people who look like me in leadership roles, and people really speaking positivity in me and saying, it would be crazy if a mentor of mine say, yeah, you can get into college easy. It's nothing. And it's such a hard task that I thought was huge. Like, wow, you really believe in me? You really think I can do that? And their belief in me was like, I guess I can, when people really see something in you that you don't see in yourself, it works wonders. So them saying that to me and doing that for me really got me to a point where, yeah, I could do anything, and I'm not limiting myself anymore. So once I will fail at something and then I will overcome it, it really instilled confidence in me. That failure at first and the ability to overcome the second time really let me know that, man, I can do this. And no matter what the generations of oppression or generations of abuse or anything I've experienced, I could overcome it. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because you're not alone in bringing up the fact that you had mentors. You'd be surprised how many people I talk to that say, I did not believe in myself, or I couldn't see this part of myself. I was just happy going the way I was, or I didn't know I could do more. And then someone comes along and says, hey, wait, like, I know you can do way more. And that kind of shatters the worldview and opens it up to a bigger and brighter future. Going back to Alexis, I wanted to ask, being in that relationship for 8 years, leaving that was obviously very difficult. How did you end up doing that, and why? Because from what I've understood, leaving abusive relationships is very difficult, very difficult.
Yeah. And so the average abusive relationship lasts 7 years, and the victim tries to leave 7 times. And that's very accurate. That's probably exactly what happened with me. And, but when I would try to leave, he would sleep outside of my apartment, knock on my windows at night, text me a million times, email me a million times, and guilt trip me, and all these insane and crazy things. If you read the book, you'll see. And just, it makes it incredibly difficult to leave, even though, you may choose yourself and, this is the time when I should go. But it really didn't happen until 2016 when I went to South Africa, and I was there for 5 months. And this is really my big moment of first time I had to really learn to be by myself and to be, across the world from everything that I know and love. And it was incredibly difficult. For the first 2 weeks, I would say I cried every day because it was it's culture shock. It's all these things. I'm not at home. I don't have my cats, all these things, these comforts that you have in your home, you don't have. And it was just so difficult. And then also he was evil and he would do things like find ways to torture me as I was abroad and just really awful, evil things that you could do to somebody. And the more that I really felt comfortable opening up to other people around me of this is what was happening, because in every way I blame myself. And I was even going to counseling, trying to fix myself. I never went to really get to the root of things. It was always, I'm messed up. Something's wrong with me. Why am I so difficult to love? And, but when I got to South Africa and he came to visit, and everybody in my house was he needs to leave. He is not welcome here. The entire atmosphere changed when he got here, and I see how he treats you, all this. And I never had that before, really. I never had other people witness him or witness the way he treated me. And so that was huge to me. And then finally, when I came back home from South Africa, it was do I want to continue to live like this extreme high and extreme lows? Do I want to continue to live like that? Or do I want, more stability? And it really felt like when I left that relationship, it was almost I don't know, I had this cloud always over me and watching me, and it just kind of dissipated when that relationship ended. And it was almost like I got half my brain capacity back, because you spend like I felt what felt like half of my brain capacity every single day, just surviving that relationship and monitoring my every move. And, what am I looking at? What am I watching? Who am I talking to? Just these constant monitorings that you don't realize. And so once I left that relationship, that's when I really started to flourish in my academics and being involved and all these things. And then exactly 1 week later, I met him.
Wow.
So
Again,
it was kind of insane. Yeah.
What advice would you give to young people or old people? I guess, age doesn't matter, but people in general to maybe prevent falling into an abusive relationship or engaging in one, if that makes sense, if that's not an insensitive question.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of times individuals enter into abusive relationships when their parents have an unhealthy situation, like unhealthy relationship, and you don't understand what love is and what love looks like, because we gain our identity and those fundamental principles of what looks like by how their parents receive and give love to each other, most likely, or to you. And so if that's an unhealthy dynamic, whether between them or between you, you don't really know what that looks like. And for myself, having a very abusive father, then it made sense for me to get into an abusive relationship. Like it makes logical sense because that's where my worth came from, my identity came from, everything. So logically it made sense. And also I tell people to take the ACEs assessment, which stands for Adverse Child Experiences. And it's basically on a scale from 1 to 10 to help you understand your different traumas you've gone through in life and what are you predisposed to. So you could be predisposed to domestic violence or addiction or all these different things in life. And you have to be really intentional on understanding, these are my traumas. This is what it could mean to me. How can I be preventative of that? And if I would have known about that much earlier, I think I would have been able to do a lot of things differently. And then on top of that, like knowing your family history and if things could run genetically, like for myself, both my grandma and my mom died by suicide. And I had several suicide attempts and I was depressed and had all these things. And I feel like if I would have known my family history, I could have been more preventative and taken more measures. So I think it's knowing your family history and then knowing your own traumas and triggers and things that you've gone through so that you can be preventative in handling that and more intentional on, your day-to-day processing of those.
Wow. That's really insightful. Especially because I think a lot of people don't kind of want to, like you said, go into that vulnerability like you guys did with your book. They don't want to look inside and see who they, like the little person sitting in the very core of us.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. And I bet you guys had a lot of insights that you got going through writing your book that you didn't have before, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yes, definitely. Like just being so vulnerable with your partner. I mean, there's not anything in the book that we didn't know about each other, but it's the way that it was told, like I could know an experience of something that happened to him, but to be in his shoes and to read it from his voice and you know what I mean? Like that's a completely different level of vulnerability that we had to get into. And like on my part, on the first page, he starts just bawling as he's reading my part out loud.
The first page.
Okay, maybe like second page. But he's bawling as like he's reading my part because like I've told him these things before, but it's sort of like living it because we bring in sensories and all these things that you don't have when I'm just talking about it.
Yeah. Wow. And Justin, you weren't crying. You were just crying for her in an empathetic way. So no worries there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to ask Alexis, what advice would you give to someone who finds themselves currently in an abusive relationship that maybe they can get themselves out?
That's a good question because that's so hard because I know more people in unhealthy relationships than in healthy. And I feel like the more that you tell them they are in an unhealthy relationship, the more, they push you out. And I've done that too. I've cut off friends and family, all that have disapproved with that relationship because it comes as an attack on that relationship. And so really all you can do as that person who loves them is to really just continue to love on them and to listen to them and try to give them little nuggets of advice. And the person that's in that relationship, I would say really understand what is a healthy relationship. What are the signs of that? And on our website at re-definingnormal.com, we have a healthy versus unhealthy checklist where you can see, you can assess your own relationship and see, is this something that's healthy or not? And it is the exact assessment that I used with my last relationship. And I'm a visual learner. And when I saw that, I had everything on unhealthy checked and one thing on healthy, and that was a stretch, that visually, woke me up of holy crap, I gotta figure this out because this is not right. And it can be easier to be in denial and to, put everything on yourself. But you have to be honest with yourself and be honest in this relationship. Is it healthy? And is it something you want moving forward? Because the person that you decide to spend your life with probably is the person you're going to have kids with. And their behaviors and their habits are going to be passed down to those children. So you have to ask yourself, do you want more of them in the world? Do you want them marrying somebody else, their offspring? Do you want that out in the world and hurting more people and whatever it is that they're doing to you? Do you want that for other people? And if the answer is no, then I would say that's probably not the person that you want to be with.
Yeah. It's interesting that we tend to pass our problem if we don't, kind of mitigate, control, fix them, whatever the word that actually fits in that, because I don't actually know. But if we just let the problem pass through us, it goes to our kids, and we probably got problems from our parents, and that's really interesting that you bring that up. I'd imagine that both of you, obviously, you've experienced trauma growing up, and that those are things that you've had to deal with, and that you've put up forth in your book. When you met each other, I know this is jumping a little bit forward in the timeline. In building your relationship, were there any hurdles that you had to get over as far as personal baggage that you had to kind of work through?
Oh yeah, definitely. We both had a lot that we need to deal with internally and with ourselves, and me almost led to us breaking up early on because, like we said, she met me a week after coming out of an 8-year abusive relationship, and we didn't start like a official relationship then. But I think maybe 3 or 4 months later, we made a relationship. And even that was way too soon. And we had so much, I feel like a rebound, or she had the same way of dealing with arguments and yelling.
Same tendencies and habits.
We both tried to carry the old habits into a new relationship and a new thing. And I don't know where it was. I mean, we talk about it in the book where we got to a point where we just had to step back and say, hey, you know what? You need to get, this is not me saying this to her. We both said it to each other, basically. Like, you have things you need to get together as an individual, whether through counseling, through spirituality, whatever you need to deal with. You need to deal with this between you and individually, and I'll love you and support you and be there for you during your process. And I can't heal you or be there for you. Like she talks about it in the book about, me, I wanted to go to, or I needed counseling, not because of something I was doing to her, but just things that I was dealing with my family issues and depression and everything. She's seen that I needed counseling, and I told her, like, hey, you can be my counselor. She's like, no, that's not fair to me for me to be your counselor. I think those are things you need to work out with a trained professional, someone who has unique skill sets to help you be who you need to be. And she said, and I was fighting her for a long time. In the book, I kind of explained, like, it was kind of quick. She said that, and it was kind of quick. But looking back on it, it took a while for me even to get there. And I wish I remembered this during the writing session, but it just hit me like a while ago. But the thing that really hit me is that she said, you don't want to pass these habits and things down to your kids, do you? You don't want to deal with this unresolved trauma in your life of wanting parents and having these voids to fill when we have kids, do you? And bringing those ideas and things into marriage. And it really hit me. And she said, it's not fair for me or your kids to deal with that. And it really hit me then, like, wow, okay, now I'm doing this for something bigger than just myself. And that really hit home. And that's when I really started to try to go to counseling and work on me as an individual. And also what helped was, she's doing big things. She went to DC to do an internship, and I'm on campus. And me just being alone and dealing with some of my own personal issues, whether it's, I got to a point in the semester where I'm just going to Bible study, I'm going to class, and I'm going home, and I'm hitting the gym too. I'm just going like those 3-4 things, and I'm coming right back home, and I'm just being to myself, like not much interaction or talking to anybody or anything. It was a huge sacrifice, but I would say I've experienced the most mental and emotional and spiritual growth that semester than I ever have. And it made me a better partner for our relationship, just working on me individually. And I think for any relationship to work in any capacity, both individuals need to work on themselves, and the other person needs to support them and love them during that process in order for them to come back a better person to be a better partner.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Agree.
So how do you, I guess, in your experience, what are the best ways that you found that you do support one another in a relationship where both parties know that they need to work on themselves?
You can go ahead.
I think it's important to know your love language and, your partner's love language, because, when you can figure out how it is that your partner wants to be loved, it's easier to love them. And say if, he really enjoys quality time, but I keep buying him gifts, then what is that? He's not getting fulfilled through that.
Or I can give a person definitely a good example of, when you don't have parents in your life, that's kind of a void you need to fill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always looking for love and looking for my parents' approval and everything. And even if they don't care, it'll be opportunities where, I would get a huge internship somewhere at a good organization. And I would tell my parents about, like, hey, Dad, I got this amazing opportunity. And he's like, yeah, okay. What about whatever? And he talks about something else. He doesn't care. Alexis was intentional in the word that my love language is words of affirmation. So when I do mess up or even make a mistake, I'm the type of person that I'm like huge snowball effect type person. If I do one thing bad, I'm about to be homeless on the street and the world is crumbling. I'm like, everything is going bad. And she like calms me down and makes it simple. Like, listen, it's okay. You made this one mistake. You'll learn. You'll be okay. When I do good, she gives me praise. She helps me. She's there for me. When I do bad, she say, hey, you'll be okay. Everything's good. So she's been around me to understand that I need those words of affirmation. I need that. I need her to encourage me. And that is ways that I need love, because she's understand that, with my family history, that I'm looking for approval from somebody, but she keeps encouraging me and letting me know that I'll be okay and I'll be good no matter what the situation is.
Yeah. I think that's a great answer. And like for me, I forgot the love language or what it's called, but it's basically like, being that support person. So it's like I get overwhelmed a lot just because we have so much, like we have 5 companies now, and to manage that and to, it's a lot. And so, when he decides to cook dinner or cleans up or, does something to help me, that is like, that's my love language. Like, I just need help. and it's like, I don't need all the fluffy words. I don't need flowers. I don't need all these things. Just help me, because we have so many things that we want to do in life. And it's always my goal. We say this all the time, is to die empty and to get everything out to the world that needs to get out there. And if I have dishes in front of me, it's like, it's blocking me from what I need to be doing.
Wow. I love that so much, because, anyone listening can obviously put themselves in, your guys' position and think, I have this loved one. Most of the time, I don't know what's going on in their darn head, but this 1 or 2 times, I think I did it right. And maybe that's helping them figure out exactly what their love language is. At what point did you guys realize that this person who I love so much, they receive and speak love in a very different way. So maybe I need to try things differently.
We actually took the actual exam.
But I think what really showed us was our first Christmas together. We spent a couple $100s on each other, and I actually ended up taking some stuff back because that's not either of our love languages. Mm-hmm. And what's actually interesting is that I took the love language quiz, and then I sent him my results and asked him to send me his back. And I was like, well, why'd you send me mine back? It was because we have the exact same love languages. It was really weird. I'm like, okay, so it's easy then. I'm just basically loving myself. But our first Christmas, we spent all this money on each other because that's how we were taught to love. And it's really just buying things for somebody else and filling that void. And, it's not being the good parent. It's not doing this. It's not doing that. It's filling the void through buying something for you. And that's how I've always been taught of what love is. It's transactional. I show you I love you this much by spending this much on you. And so we really tried to do that for each other our first Christmas, and like just went overboard and bought all this extra stuff. And then I just saw a picture of it the other day, like came up on my timeline of everything we bought for each other. And now we don't even buy cards. Like we're at the point where we don't buy each other anything. And I remember for his 21st birthday, I bought him a card, and he looked on the back and was like, $4.99.
No, it wasn't $4.99. It was like $7.
You didn't even read it.
$7.98.
But this is how I knew. I was like, this is how I know he's gonna be my husband, because I'm so cheap. He was like, next time I'll go to Walgreens with you. You pick out the card, I'll read it, and then we'll put it back and leave. And I was like, that's how I know you're my husband. Was because you're just as cheap as I am. But we really do nothing for each other on holidays other than,
it's quality time.
It's quality time. We'll watch a movie together. We'll sit and read together. Like, we don't have a TV in our living room or in our bedroom. And for most people, that's completely foreign. And completely honest, that was completely foreign to me until I met my parents or my adopted parents, just to clarify. And when I first moved in with them, they didn't have a TV in their living room. I thought they were insane. I was like, who doesn't have a TV in their living room? That's where it goes. And I remember just thinking that's so crazy. And then, now I'm like, well, no, now that makes sense, because now you have quality time together. But little things like that, you just don't realize until, I don't know, examples. As you mentioned before, somebody planting that piece of information in you that you just didn't even know you needed.
Yeah. And actually, on that point, both of you have a unique experience of having, I guess, for lack of a better term, like one paradigm with your birth parents, and then you entered the foster care system and you were presented with probably differing paradigms. What were some lessons that you took away from that, thinking, oh, my birth parents actually got that right, or maybe they didn't get this one right and I like this other paradigm that I've been given, for example?
Well, I mean, it was hard for me because I knew my birth parents, and I had a relationship, so to speak, with my biological parents, and I still do now. And I've had a relationship with my biological parents through the foster care system. And I would say after I entered the foster care system, that's when the relationship for me really got harmful and worse, because like I said, I grew up in Detroit since like 17 or 18, and they never lived more than like 25 or 30 minutes away from me my entire time in foster care. So that really started to develop my mental health issues and make me feel worthless and make me feel like, wow, I'm not that far away from them. So it's really like, they really don't care, like when you first enter the system, you just think that, okay, your parents may be dealing with something, maybe you'll eventually move back, or even if you don't move back, they'll put forth the effort to help. But it got to a point where that really just added on and just started to hurt. And like, I can kind of tell, like, oh, it started to reveal more about my parents. I would say, like, wow, maybe they just either don't know how to be parents, or maybe they're just too caught up with their life that they're not too concerned about children or their children or what I was going through at the time. But it was very revealing. And unfortunately, it revealed, in my opinion, some of the worst and some of the bad things that I was able to look at their situation from the outside looking in, and the stories that I would hear as far as the trauma and violence and everything they had going on was very harmful and destructive. But it was a blessing that I wasn't watching it hands-on, because me leaving that situation, though I did have my struggles in foster care going home to home, me leaving that situation really made it not normal for me anymore. To a degree, some of the things are still normal, and I still have to change my perspective on it and be aware and intentional. But it made me to a point where I'm aware that the things that happened with my parents and in our household wasn't normal or acceptable.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm still, sort of doing that of just assessing, like, what did I learn as a kid, and what am I still doing now? And it's like this constant like cycle that I'm thinking of. And it's that shift of your paradigm of, what did you grow up with and where are you at now? And that's that turning point chapter for us of when did we start to have that shift of, holy crap, that was not normal of what I went through. And so much of that happened for me when I met my foster parents, who are now my adoptive parents. And, when I moved in with them and there wasn't screaming, yelling, hitting, drugs, or like all these things that were just, there as kids. And then, in their house of, it's peaceful, it's quiet, it's loving. They say what they mean. And, it was just all these different things for me, and how they raise their kids. And I think that was definitely the biggest thing for me. And I'm still kind of in awe of that. And one example is, this happened actually like I think it was last year. And my little brother, Isaiah, he did something stupid. It was just like, he locked the RV keys inside. And my dad came home and he was like, "Where's Isaiah?" And I'm like, "Oh, he's in trouble." And, like the big sister, like, yeah. Oh.
He's gonna get it.
Yeah, he's gonna get it. And I go to the room and I come back and Isaiah's hiding under the covers because he's terrified. Okay, I don't think they've ever even been spanked, right? Like, these kids are just extremely loved on. Like, I don't even think they're spanking. And because I think I've only heard my parents yell like maybe 5 to 10 times, like total together. It's just, that was when it really just messed me up mentally of like, holy crap, I don't even know what you sound like when you yell.
Yeah.
And I went to my room and I came back and Isaiah's still hiding under the covers, but my dad is laying next to him on the couch, rubbing his back and telling him, "I love you. You're still my son. What you did made me upset, but I love you and it's okay. And it's going to be okay." And I'm just standing there bawling. And I'm like, oh my God, like to see your dad go from angry to loving in like a 2-minute period was just like mind blowing. And it was such a beautiful thing because I've never seen that. Like, I've never seen such beautiful grace and love, and gentleness. And then Isaiah's running around laughing and happy when he was just so terrified. And that is just one thing that will always sit with me, of watching him do that. And now I have that expectation of my partner, to be like that because I've seen differently. Whereas what I grew up with, that would have been a whooping, like with a belt or a shoe or a broom or I don't know, whatever you can get. That's what it would have been because that's what I had. Mm-hmm. Versus, it ended up being like love, mm-hmm. which is exactly what it should have been.
Yeah. Wow. I love those examples. Interesting enough, you kind of have a similar thing when you get married. Like, you enter a new relationship and your partner is teaching you things that you don't even know just because, they have those beautiful paradigms passed down through their family that you're like, wow, that's possible. And I guess it all goes back to what we were talking about before, how you just need to be able to glimpse that the opposite is possible. Mm-hmm. And then you can be like, wow, like it is possible. And then you kind of create it for yourself. So that's really cool that you guys both mm-hmm. had similar situations.
I always feel like I always tell people, I'm like, my parents are like aliens. Like, I've never met anybody like them ever, that they just have such a healthy relationship. And it's like, why is this so foreign to me? Like, why have I never seen that besides them? And I'm like, something is wrong with that. And so for me, I'm like, that needs to be their legacy for me, of how they impacted me. Is I want that, and I want to take that and pass it on, that they have had a bigger impact than just on their couple kids. Like, this is going to go so much further than that, because that's how they chose to live their life.
Wow. Yeah. Like I said, we either pass on our problems to our kids or the opposite of problems, solutions, maybe. I don't know.
Yep.
One question I wanted to ask, you said you have 5 companies that you manage. How are you guys able to maintain your relationship while still managing those companies? Like, what do you guys do?
I mean, that's a great question. I'm still trying to find answers.
I'm joking. I can start. Do you want me to start?
Sure. You can.
Okay. So we actually just bought our first house also. So last year, Justin got graduated. We started 2 companies, wrote a book, got married, and bought a house all in 1 year. That's just a lot. But we were living with my parents, and there were 9 people in there, and they're like literally just like angels. They're incredible people, but it's 9 people. And I essentially lived in my room like 22 hours a day, just because it was just kids screaming all the time. And there was no separation between work and our relationship. Like I literally get up and sit at my desk, and I am there 15 hours a day, and we had no us time. And I was like, are we business partners, or are we in a relationship? Like, and it was really, really difficult to keep that boundary. And so I told him, I said, okay, so we're in agreement, right? That in January, we're going to have our own place. Like, we have to get out, like not in a bad way, it's nothing negative happening, but in order for us to be who we need to be as partners in marriage and in life, we have to have space for us to develop that. Because right now I feel, like our bedroom is partly our kitchen, our workspace, because it started to be our storage space because we ordered 1,000 books. I mean, it was really ridiculous. Like you walk in, you couldn't even move. Yeah. And it just got to be so overwhelming. And I was overwhelmed every day in that room. And it was really having a toll on me, which is having a toll on our marriage. And it was just a lot. And so that's to say that 2 days before Christmas, we bought our first house. It only took 2.5 weeks. And we started the process, and it was like, boom, move in. And then now what we do, it's still a working progress, because it's hard to take off, that business owner hat sometimes and put on the wife hat. And it's like, that balance is it's going to be a thing until we get into a better groove of it. Yeah. But I think one thing that we've done to try to maintain a balance is we have our office, where that's the workplace. And we have our bedroom, where that's our place. And there's no technology in there outside of the Alexa and probably and an alarm clock. we don't bring technology into there because we're distracted all day. We don't really see each other all day because he has his desk, I have my desk. And, we don't really just communicate as husband and wife. And so outside of the office, it's like we can be us, like our marriage. And, then we go to the office and it's like business mode. So I think that's how we're really trying to separate it, is having those separate spaces. But am I missing anything?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. The two can be intertwined pretty easy, where, it's just business and wife at the same time, I guess. But I think it's just something we're working towards, and we just gotta, figure out. We're still young, we still got time and things to figure out. So
yeah. I mean, we just started this a year ago, right? Yeah. Like December 2019, we relaunched the Scholarship Expert, and here we are a year later with all these companies and trying to navigate that as business owners, as a newly married couple, new homeowners. It's a lot to take in and a lot to manage. But I think our experiences in foster care have really prepared us for this, because we had to learn to be flexible and resilient and resourceful. And that's exactly what we've learned. And we apply that towards our relationship and towards our businesses, and nothing can stop us. We've seen beyond those limitations once we left our environment, and here we are a year later. It's kind of insane. Yeah. Literally on my timeline today was the video we took when we started the outline of our book, when we were in Luxor, Egypt, on our way to South Africa. And it's just like, oh my gosh, 1 year ago, we were outlining our book, and here we are. I have like hundreds of bookshelves right here and a poster right there. Like, oh my gosh, that's insane.
Wow. Well, I mean, however you guys do it, you seem to be doing it very well. So, I mean, just kudos to you and anyone who can do all of that in 1 year with COVID-19 going on. Like, you get the gold star in my book.
Oh, I appreciate that.
That meant the world to us. A gold star in your book.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for being on the show. I know we don't have too much time, so let me ask you the last couple questions. How can people reach out to you, support you, see what you're up to? Obviously, there's the book, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Here it is.
So redefining normal, how two foster kids beat the odds and discover healing, happiness, and love. You can contact us about the book, presentations, speaking engagement, anything else at info@redefiningnormal.com. Other businesses, Rose Empowerment Group. Contact us at Rose Empowerment Group, or website roseempowermentgroup.com, info@Rose Empowerment Group. The website for Redefining Normal, redefiningnormal.com. Facebook is Redefining Normal Memoir. Instagram is redefining normal. And yeah, so
yeah, I mean, those are the main ones. The other one is Rose Media Group, where it's mainly PR and marketing, where we have people come to us more as a consulting role. And then the other one is our new home we're opening up is Airbnb. So
Sweet. Awesome.
Yeah, it's like make money to pay your mortgage. Hey,
exactly.
Why not?
No, it's a great idea. I love that idea. So I'll get all those up in the show notes. But as far as action items, stuff that our audience can do right after they're done doing this podcast, I came up with 3. But if you guys want to add some to this list, totally let me know. So the first one is to look for mentors / get a community, kind of pulling from both your stories, how you had people around you, telling you, hey, that's not normal. This is normal. You can do so much better. Kind of that idea. The second one was to take the healthy relationship assessment that you'd mentioned, and then obviously apply it. Don't just take it and do nothing. And then the third one was to take the love languages test and similarly apply that as well. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add?
Buy our book. So that's the last thing. We're actually offering 50% off autographed copies for all listeners. And so that's on our website at re-definingnormal.com. And it's promo code 50OFFRN at re-definingnormal.com.
Yes.
And on that website is where you'll also get that the healthy versus unhealthy assessment. It's about halfway, 3/4 of the way down that main page. And the love language test, you could just search love language quiz. And then lastly, I would say, is what was mentioned before, just as another, just to bring it up again, is the ACEs assessment. And it's ACES. And you can just search ACEs assessment or ACEs quiz, and you can take that. It's free. Everything's free.
I love it.
Except for our book. Our book's not free, but
but nice 50% off. And by the way, I love that promo code 50 off right now, or RN. So I love
it could be right now. Hey, I like that.
Yeah, that's what it said to me. Was it supposed to mean something else or something?
Redefine normal.
Oh, duh. I don't know.
But I like that though. I'm gonna use that.
I thought that's what you guys were going. I was like, that's really smart. Anyways, but thanks so much, guys, for being on the show, Justin and Alexis. I appreciate it. I've loved hearing your stories, your insights. It's really put me in your guys' shoes and helped me learn through that. So I really appreciate it.
Wow, we appreciate you a lot.
Yeah, definitely. We thank you so much for being on here, and we really just appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I know for a fact if you do those specific action items, you will have more fulfilled relationships. But I think also you'll understand yourself a little bit better and be able to interact with the world at large in a much better way. So again, thank you guys for paying attention to the show. I really love having these conversations. I love giving them to you. So if you want to give back and support the show, there are a couple things you can do. The first thing is actually go get yourself fit. Yeah, I said that right. So recently, about a month ago, I got a Fittrack, which is a little scale that actually you step on it. It tells you how much you weigh, and then your body mass index, and then your basal metabolic rate, and then your protein ratio, and then so many more other things that helps you really get a good idea of where your health is, because seeing your weight doesn't do much just by itself, right? But seeing your weight in conjunction with your muscle mass, in conjunction with your basal metabolic rate, really helps you understand, okay, I need to do X, Y, Z, right? So if you want to get a Fittrack today and help support the podcast, but also help support your own physical fitness, go hit the link in the show notes below. Go get your Fittrack today. Start measuring your health metrics so that way you can see exactly where you are and get where you exactly want to be. The next thing you can do to support the show is actually hit subscribe. Make sure you never miss a single episode. We have episodes coming out Mondays and Thursdays. And never miss a single episode. And if possible, share the show with someone you know. I know that there's someone in your life who is maybe going through a hard time with their relationships. Go ahead and share the show with them so they can have better relationships today. Now, I also want to invite you guys to help us raise $1,000 for Operation Underground Railroad. This is a campaign that we on the podcast started about a year ago, and we're trying to raise this money to give to this nonprofit so that way they can go undercover and rescue kids from sex trafficking. These kids need their help, and you and I can give help. So go to GoFundMe.com/overcoming-average, donate some money today. Even just $1 goes a long way in helping rescue kids. I love this podcast, and I love giving these conversations to you guys, and I know for a fact that you will find meaning and value in it. Now, the only thing left up to you is to go do hard things, because when you do, you will overcome average.